This is a Cycling Over 60 podcast, Season 2, Episode 24, A Lifetime of Keeping Bikes Rolling, and I'm your host, Tom Butler. I am back as I continue my journey to use cycling to reverse lifestyle-related diseases and roll back time. As I mentioned in the episode on goals for the year, I'm looking to do an average of 10 miles a day in 2024. This is day 11, so I should be at 110 miles, but I am only at 70. So to stay on track, I need to pick up 70 miles in the next 3 days. I actually see that as doable. However, to make that, I need to do two things. One is to be able to ride in cold temperatures, and the other is to ride after dark. I'm very happy with my cold weather gear so far. I have some great cold weather pants from Baleaf, that's Baleaf. I'm really impressed with all their stuff. And for Christmas, I also got a perfect cycling beanie to wear under my helmet. My gloves are terrific. And I've been taking a fleece face mask with me to pull up on the downhills or if there's going to be wind. The only vulnerable part is my feet. I have some neoprene toe covers to go over my shoes, but my feet are still pretty cold. It is bearable, but I wouldn't mind finding a better solution. Now, Rock Bros have a heating cycling boot that costs $80. I would not need that very often, but I'm really tempted to get them. I wouldn't want a different shoe because my Specialized Torch 2.0 shoes are perfect for my feet, especially with the specialized inserts. A heated over boot seems like something to try. I'm going to try to get out in 25 degrees this weekend to see how I do. It is rare for it to get this cold here, so if I can handle that, I can pretty much handle anything here. Except, of course, if there's a lot of snow. And it is snowing lightly out right now as I'm recording this. There are so many times that I'm getting out late in the afternoon, and I've been cutting rides short to not be out after dark, but it just isn't going to work. I have a great trail that I can ride on at night, and I'm pretty much the only one on the trail. What I discovered recently was that my headlamp is just not bright enough, so I did some headlamp shopping. I found an LSAN headlamp pretty cheap on Amazon. I don't know how to pronounce LSAN, so I'm just going to give the letters. It claims to be 1200 lumens. I have no way to test it, but it certainly is brighter than my old headlamp. It is rechargeable and waterproof, and it can also serve as a portable charger. It was really cheap. However, I'm not sure I should have gone with it. I looked all over for info on LSAN, and I couldn't find anything. So it is impossible to get an idea about labor practices behind their products. I feel like that is something I should have taken into account. I also got tired of a wet streak down my back and butt, so I picked up an SKS S-Blade rear fender. They are a German company, and I do feel pretty good about doing business with them. The fender is a very practical design, and I know it'll make a big difference in the rain. I need to get out and do more climbing. The Chili Hilly ride is in 45 days. It is 2,173 feet of elevation in 33 miles. That will be a challenge for me. My climbing training route is about a mile with 390 feet of elevation gain. If I ride that 3 times, I'm getting over 1,000 feet in 6 miles. I can easily turn that into a 10-mile ride, so then it would count towards my 10-mile average. But by doing that, I'm not making up for days missed. There is access to a bike path near the hill, so I could add additional miles, but my legs are usually pretty wiped out after the 3 climbs. I do need to prioritize the climbing now. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'm going to get left behind on Chili Hilly. One final note, I was able to swap out the spring in my Future Shock on the Roubaix without much problem. So I feel some confidence going into 2024 concerning my ability to do some of my own bike maintenance. That's good news. I recently watched a news story featuring the owner of a small local bike shop named Phil Meyer. I was very intrigued by how he has spent a lifetime keeping bikes rolling. It is tough for small shops to make it, and I called Phil to ask if he would come on the podcast and talk about his journey. Here is our discussion. I would like to welcome Phil Meyer to the podcast. Thanks for joining me today, Phil.
Sure, Tom, no problem. Glad to be here. I'm here at Phil's Bike Shop before we open up on a slow day, but happy to chat and talk about bike stuff.
Awesome. I brought Phil on because I believe he represents something special in the cycling world. Phil owns Phil's Bike Shop, as he said, in Federal Way, Washington. And I think as we talk, you will see why I think of Phil and his shop as unique. So let me start out just by asking, what is the early memory that you have of a bike?
Early memory I have of a bike. Well, when I'm the youngest of seven, grew up on the south side of Chicago, had five older sisters. We didn't have a lot of money, but mom and dad worked. We were fine, middle class people, but I never had my own bike, as I recall, until probably I was 16 or 17. But the first bike I recall is at a friend's house 3 blocks away, and it wasn't a Stingray, but kind of a copy, like a Raleigh or something like that. I did not know how to ride a bike. Parents were busy. Nobody ever taught me, like, hey, this is how you ride a bike. And I remember watching my buddy ride a bike. And then I just started sitting on this banana seat and kind of doing the scoot. And then before you know it, I was actually pedaling down his driveway. So it was like an early version of a run bike. So it was like an aha moment for me. I'm like, oh my God, I can do this. This is awesome. And that was probably at like age 8 or something like that. So it was relatively late. Like we never had bikes with training wheels and all that kind of stuff. It was, and we were old school free range children running around the neighborhood. So we just learned what we could as we went along. So I remember that bike. And then the other bike, I remember the first brand new bike was I was in high school, probably age 15, like something like that. And we went to a big department store in the Chicago area called Zayre's. And my mom bought a Huffy the Wind. So Huffy, if anybody knows bikes, is not exactly known for quality, but that was what we could afford. And it was like a road bike, but it was aerodynamic. So all the tubes were aero and the brake levers were aero and all this stuff, even though it weighed 38 pounds. But I was excited to have it. And then I thought it was really cool until I got my first job in a bike shop. And then I realized this maybe isn't the best bike for me. But so each bike has been a progression. It's funny. If you're a bike person, every single new bike you get is like, oh my God, this is like the best bike ever. Why didn't I get a bike a while ago? I'm
Right.
probably up to my 15th new bike at least by now. And I'm still excited when I get a new one.
That's awesome. I believe you started working on bikes in your teens. And I wonder if you could talk about what got you going with bike service.
So, being the youngest of the seven kids on the south side of Chicago, we all went to public school, and I was progressing through school okay. In high school, I kind of fell in with the wrong crowd and just had a bad attitude. And by sophomore year, I was just like, I'm just not going to school. I just started cutting school and hanging out and partying and doing stupid stuff. And this was at a school where, like, it's a marginal school. Like, if you get kicked out of this school, what are they going to do to you? Well, after about 6 months of that, and I got a bunch of bad grades, they were like, well, you know what? We're going to kick you out of school. So I actually got kicked out of my high school on the south side of Chicago. Then it was kind of a wake up moment, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't live here in my parents' basement and just live off of other people. I mean, it was time to wake up and like be responsible, I guess. It was kind of like my moment of like, oh my God, I'm headed down the wrong path here. I better do something. So I went to this small private school for about a year, downtown Chicago. It only had like a dozen students. It wasn't a real school. I didn't feel like I belonged. And at that point, it wasn't a lack of intelligence that I had or I felt or ability. It was just motivation. So I was completely motivated, did really well at that school for a year. And then I ended up getting back into Morgan Park High School. We petitioned them back and we're like, hey, he's turned the corner. He's ready to come back. It took a while, but they actually let me back in. So I was about a year behind. And by the time I got back in, I took a lot of classes. And one class I was in was a wood shop / print shop. And then I got to know the teacher real well, and I would work the printing machines, and we'd actually make a lot of the forms for school and all that kind of stuff. Well, part of the job in this class was also an ICE, Industrial Cooperative Education, where this teacher would pick out students that he thought were a good match, and he would place them in these different jobs that had opportunities. And you might get out of class, one class early. And one of the jobs that he frequently had was a local bike shop. So it was Beverly Cyclery on the south side of Chicago at 91st and Western Avenue. The bike shop is still there today. I was like, oh, well, I mean, I know how to work on bikes because, I tinkered on bikes and I worked on all these hand-me-down bikes I had and whatever. And so I got a job at that bike shop, quickly realized how much I did not know. And I really had an aptitude for it, though. I really enjoyed the mechanical workings of a bicycle and how the brakes worked and resolved all these problems I had in the past. I remember trying to fix bikes and I was like, well, I can fix the wheels and I can fix the brakes, but the brake has to be about 4 inches wide because the wheel is so bent that that's just the best that I could do. And I realized, oh my gosh, you can actually straighten wheels and you can even forks. We bent forks and we did all kinds of cool stuff. And so I kind of worked my way up through that place, Beverly Cyclery, and continued to work there every summer all the way through college, which was in 1984. I think it was the last year I worked there. So I worked there from like 1979, through 1979 through about 86. thoroughly enjoyed the work. He told the teacher repeatedly, "Oh, Phil was the best student you ever sent over out of maybe 20 different students over the years." And I really enjoyed it. I had a knack for it. And I thought, you know what? I did really enjoy doing a bike shop. Maybe someday when I retire, I mean, that would be fun. I'll open a bike shop. Like just thinking like, oh yeah, it's like a recreational pastime. Of course, it's much more involved than that. But I still always had the passion for bicycles. But my parents both worked downtown. I had my scary moment of high school, and I'm like, I need to stay on this path, and I need to go to school. And the parents are willing to send me to college. And even though I had a sketchy high school GPA, I managed to get into the University of Iowa into the business program. And I went there, for 5 years, got a business degree. And actually, that's how I ended up in Seattle, because I met a huge group of friends that ended up moving to Seattle. And then I visited a couple of times. I was still working in bikes a little bit on the side, but not at the shop, because I was working in Chicago, basically doing a suit and tie job. And then after about 5 years of that, my company got taken over and I ended up getting laid off. I looked for more work. I just didn't feel the passion for this type of work in Chicago. I'd visited Seattle twice. And I thought, you know what? That is so cool out there. You get to actually live there and work at the same time. And it's like you're on vacation. I had a brand new car at that time, a 1992 Saturn SL1 that I had payments on. So that scared me. But I had a place to move into with some roommates and some friends. And I just up and loaded up all my stuff. And mom helped pull a U-Haul. And we drove all the way. I remember with my cat too. We had a cat in my car all the way out to Seattle. And then I tried to get a suit and tie job for a while, but that wasn't happening. And I'm like, you know what? I know how to work on bikes. So I sent out a cover letter. By that point, I had multiple letters of reference to, I think, 20 different bike shops. I got offers from 2 of them, and I accepted an offer at Angle Lake Cyclery. That was the first place I landed on Pack Highway and 208th in SeaTac area, actually 220th. But what I liked about them is they had 3 locations at the time. They did kayaks, they had recumbents, they had all kinds of cool stuff. The manager was actually from Chicago, and he's like, he interviews me. So like, basically, I just show you a workbench and you're ready to go. I'm like, yeah, I don't need training. I'm ready to go. Let's do this. So I started there, and here I still am working on bikes.
When you started in Angle Lake, it sounded like that was a different experience from Beverly, or were they similar, or how would you describe that?
Very different, because I was doing full time at Angle and Beverly Cycler in Chicago. I was just doing part time during the summer, so now I'm there through the seasons. And it was different because they had recumbents, which I didn't know anything about. I learned how to speak and work recumbents at that shop, and they did Klepper folding kayaks, which was also very interesting. It's a German boat that's harks back to pre-World War II, with a balsam wood frame that all comes apart and separates, and then you put it into 2 pieces. And so it was just unique and interesting. And I was going there with experience. So there was, I think, 4 or 5 mechanics, and I was basically the second one in line. And I quickly proved myself. And, I just still really enjoyed the work. I enjoy the mechanical aspects of making a bike work and figuring out why it doesn't work and how to make it work better.
So can you talk a bit about the bike as a machine, about what's intriguing about it? Obviously, you've stuck with it a long time.
Yeah. I think the bare essence of it to me is it's the human powered vehicle that it is. It's the most efficient vehicle, and yet still relatively simple. And the basic technology has not changed in the last 100 plus years. You've still got pedals, crank, chain. If you're lucky, you got brakes. But it was exercise, and it was also transportation, and it was also a job, and it was also recreation. So it gave me all of these things. I mean, I always enjoyed the kind of the working out part of it. I wanted to maintain a healthy lifestyle. And I'm like, well, you can, instead of going to a gym and just sweating on some treadmill or whatever, you just ride your bicycle. And I remember the freedom back to that banana seat bike. The first time I could ride a bike, it's like, oh my gosh, the whole neighborhood just opened up a whole new world to me. Now I could go to parks that were 3 miles away, and the store that's 2 miles away, and the pool that was a 5-mile drive to that park. And in Southside Chicago, we had one hill, and it was about 50 feet to 100 feet long. And of course, you would choose different routes based on how steep of a climb you wanted. I mean, compared to where I live now here in Seattle. But that was always a unique thing about me. And I just always enjoyed the bicycle. And I just had a mechanical knack for it. And it's funny, I truly have a knack for that, but I just do not like working on cars. I'm pretty good home repair, but I mean, bicycles are definitely my thing. Like I get it, and that's still, I get most of it, but a lot of the high tech stuff nowadays, like I'm not the best with electronic shifters. I don't enjoy overhauling suspension forks and shocks and that kind of stuff, but dialing in shifting and brakes and truing wheels and wheel building, I find wheel building is a magic art. Like you hold a handful of wire spokes and a rim that you could just bend like a pretzel. But yet, if you put that together with a hub properly and tension it, I mean, man, that can take a tremendous amount of abuse just riding up and down. So I've just always been kind of fascinated with it. And I have a good memory, and I like to recognize problems and it's problem solving. And I'm like, oh, I've done that. I've seen that. I've made that mistake. I know how to fix it. So this is what I would do.
How would you describe the bike industry at the time? I think you said 91 maybe when you moved to Seattle?
It was still booming. It's always been booming. And some people would almost say it's a recession-proof industry. It's not that, but it was still quite dynamic. Mountain bikes were up and coming. I remember I had my first mountain bike in Chicago in the mid 80s, a Schwinn Sierra I was so proud of with no suspension and cantilever brakes and all that kind of stuff. But mountain bikes were still the hot ticket to have. Road bikes still quite popular. No disc brakes around. And then again, this shop did recumbents. And so that was quite interesting too. And we have not just recumbents that you could buy, but there was a local frame builder, Jim, sorry, I forget his last name, but the brand was Counterpoint Bicycles. And he was a French horn player in the Seattle Symphony, but he had his wife who did not like to ride on bicycles. She did not want to ride a regular tandem. So he figured out how he could make a recumbent tandem combo. So the front person is in a recumbent. The rear person, the captain, is upright in a conventional bicycle, so he can keep an eye on her and see what's going on. Plus, the other unique thing about that particular bike is the front person's recumbent had its own separate freewheel and derailleur, so she could coast, he could just pedal. So it was a very unique bike. So just things like that is bicycles is bringing more people to more exposure and just, I don't know, it's you get a little snapshot of everyone's life when they stop in and they have a bike problem or a bike inquiry or they're searching for something, and you kind of have a feel for what it is they're doing with the bicycle.
I would imagine, and maybe this is a wrong assumption, that mountain biking would have been bigger out here than it would have been in Chicago.
Absolutely. It was getting bigger in our area. I mean, where I lived in the south side of Chicago, if you went out mountain biking, it was basically just areas they would call the forest preserves, which was just kind of like out here, it would be forest land or a large park. And so we had some trails, but nothing like out here. Yeah. And also moving out here, mountain bike, I had to reacclimate being a flatlander from the Midwest just to, oh my gosh, these hills and the climbs and the mud and all the other stuff. But the options and the opportunities were just so extensive. I mean, and they still are, within a half hour to an hour of Seattle, you've got 30 different options on places to go ride your mountain bike off trail. So, and I was into that. And I was also that time I was probably more into road biking. So you've got you're an STP guy. I see you're 2023, you rode last year. I did 17 STPs with a group of friends.
Wow.
In a row. And then plus Ramrod and RSVP and the High Pass Challenge and pretty much every road ride around, rode down the Oregon coast a few times. So we were really into road biking. But the other thing about cycling is it's also it brings friends together. It's a communal thing. So there are some people, kind of like the randonneur crowd, who really are best served just they ride alone. They've got their head down. They ride 400 kilometers. They've got full fenders. They've got generators, lights. It's like a mission of getting point A to B, where with most of the folks, the cycling through the years that I've done, it was a group of friends that, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to do this ride. We're going to meet, we're going to have fun, we're going to work out. And then afterwards, then we're going to go have a beer or talk about it, go have lunch, have a barbecue, something. It was a kind of a fun kind of bonding experience. And that's what I got of STP all the years. It was really the training with all your friends and the accomplishment and getting the work done, but then enjoying the after party as well. It doesn't get any easier as we get older. It's fine. You go a little slower, but it's still fine. But I find as I'm almost 60, I'm 59, I still ride frequently. We have a mountain bike group that we meet here at my shop, and we ride at Dash Point State Park once a week. But I'm not on the road as much anymore. I just not as motivated. The other thing is, I think it's probably been almost 30 years now. I moved out here in 93. And throughout that time, it's really been quite cycling focused as far as activities go. So now I'm into other things. I'm into whitewater kayaking, and I went skiing at Mission Ridge this past weekend, just hiking, a lot of other projects. It was just, everything was always about bikes and where are we going biking? And it can be quite time consuming. So I still enjoy it. I still enjoy the ride, but no more STPs for me. I did after 17, I can still see every turn, every bridge, every rest stop that I skip, every rest stop we go to. There's that hole my friend crashed in 2001. I mean, just it's still a cool experience. That many people out there on the road at one time. It's really quite impressive, but it's just not in my wheelhouse anymore.
I can see that. 17 is a lot. I don't think I'll make 17, but that is a lot.
Yeah.
So at some point you decide to open your own bike shop. I'm thinking that it when you opened it was Phil's bike shop.
It was a little bit more of a tongue twister. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So I did 7 to 8, I think it was 7 or 8 years at Angle Lake Cyclery. I enjoyed the work. I was definitely good at what I was doing, but I could just see, kind of like back in high school, I could see I'm on the wrong path. Like this isn't working out. I just could not spend my life at Angle Lake Cyclery. Met some great friends there. The owner was a fantastic mechanic. But during that time, they actually sold their other two locations. There was two brothers that owned it. One brother moved away to Colorado. The brother that remained, his focus was really more in artistic expression, and he had a college degree in marketing and arts and that kind of stuff. And he was a great mechanic. He was like a MacGyver, like with a drill press, a Dremel tool, and a workbench. I mean, the guy could make almost anything work. But unfortunately, his work habits were not so great. So it was just, I just didn't like the kind of the way the shop was run and tools getting lost and boxes open and stuff laying all over the place. And then the manager was going to quit. And I'm like, I was in line. I mean, I could be the manager, I could stay here, but I just can't do this. This isn't my place. So I have to find another place to work. So while I'm still in the bike business, so I sent out another batch of cover letters and such. And this time I landed at the Velo bike shop up on Capitol Hill. What I like again about this shop is they had two shops. It was a family run store. Capitol Hill is a vibrant, happening area. I was still young enough at that time where I still enjoyed going up to Capitol Hill. Nowadays, I mean, I don't know if you want to go up there unless you're walking or taking a bus or something, but you don't want to drive up there. But anyway, I ended up working there for 4 years. During that time, I had some customers that had followed me from Angle Lake all the way up to this shop on Capitol Hill, and other people and other friends. And I still realized that I still really enjoy the work. I'm running the service center. I saw the service center as the real kind of core hub of the bike shop. Like anybody can put helmets and water bottles on the wall and sell trinkets and stuff. But when people come in and they've got a broken derailleur, why does my brake squeak, or why does this not work? I mean, it's really the service department that seemed to make the place run. And I felt that that's what's happening, and I'm the one at the center of it. I need to do something better. So I had two friends that I did STP a number of times with, who told me I need to do this. And it's, a scary thought to launch into your own business. And I'm still like, oh man, I don't know if I should do this. And not only did they say you should do this, they offered to loan me $10,000 between the two of them. And I'm like, oh my God. It's like, at that time I had no savings. I'm living almost paycheck to paycheck, no insurance, young, thinking you'll never get hurt, all that kind of stuff. And I kind of talked about it with my family. And even though none of them are out here, they're all back in the Chicago area. And another sister, I told her about it. And she was working, had good funds at that time. She loaned me $9,000. So here I am. I've got $19,000. And I'm like, all right, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm just going to have to do this. So I scoured for locations. And it's funny, when I was working at Angle Lake, I was actually living in Ballard. So I was commuting from Ballard to Angle Lake Cycler, which is in SeaTac. But then I had moved up to Capitol Hill. And then fortunately I was close to that location. Then I was still in Capitol Hill and possibly commuting somewhere else. And then I ended up meeting my partner, my current wife, who had a house in Federal Way, Auburn area, moved down here and realized like there's really a pocket in the South Sound where there just isn't any good bike shops. And I'm like, I a theory that, I'm going to open a bike shop down here. And even there's so few bike shops, even if it wasn't the best bike shop, I'm sure it would still make it. But of course, I'm going to make a good bike shop. So we're going to make this work. So I scoured locations and I came up with this spot in Federal Way. And why I like this area is there was a brand new Fred Meyer being put in right across the street. There was an Albertsons kitty corner to that. There was a Safeway. And then there was a grocery store about a mile away. What we found out was a grocery store just opening in February of 2000 called Winco Foods. And at the time, my wife was a server at a restaurant. Again, she didn't have insurance, neither did I. And she sees this Winco Foods and she's like, wow, maybe I should just think about getting a part-time job there, because like we need benefits. I'm like, well, hey, that's great. If you're going to work two jobs, I got no time for this, because I've picked out this location and you launch into a new business entirely. So anyway, she started working there, two jobs. I went full on at Phil's Southside Cyclery, was my tongue twister, because I wanted people to see my name in the book, because people know me as a bike mechanic. So I want them to know it's Phil. I want them to know it was on the South Side, not like Greg's Green Lake or Mott Lake or something like that. And then everyone just threw around Cyclery, like WordCheck still doesn't like the word cyclery, but it's out there. So I went with Phil's Southside Cyclery, the tongue twister, was at that location for 15 years, opened in February of 2000. And things went well. I mean, the rent was super high. I was scared, especially in the wintertime. Several times I thought I have to get another job or something else has got to happen here. But then I realized I don't have time for another job. And what am I going to do for another job? I mean, work midnight. I just have to dedicate myself to the bike shop. So it was me and typically 2 to 4 employees, and a lot of times just me, and just struggling and keeping it going and balancing work life with home life and recreation life. But working 7 days a week for the first 8 years until finally I started taking Sundays off. And then it was 6 days a week. And then now I'm actually down to 5 because I'm taking off Sundays and Mondays. But after 15 years at that location, I realized, well, the rent was going up, of course. That was my third lease. And that the neighborhood over there, just too many businesses jammed in food service wise. The parking lot was a mess. Just wasn't a great neighborhood. So I had a customer that was a realtor, and I told him about my search. He pointed out a few locations, and the one location he pointed out is right by Decatur High School. There's this collection of 3 kind of small buildings, and he's like, it was a realtor, but the guy he just absolutely wants to get somebody in there. And I go look at it, and I'm like, I don't know, this just doesn't seem right. But the guy, I guess, made me an offer I just couldn't refuse. And here I am. I've been here since 2015 in Center of Federal Way. But what I really like about it, and which I realized I should have known 15 years ago, is that a bike shop does not have to be near all these busy places. Because for one thing, if you're going to ride a bike or test ride a bike, you really don't want to be in the middle of a busy place. You want to be more off in the central neighborhood or something. Plus, a bike shop is a destination store. It's not just a impulse store like an ice cream cone. You're not just walking along or coffee like, oh, hey, there's a Starbucks, look at coffee, or there's an ice cream. It's like, no, you have a broken bicycle and you need to find a tire, a tube, a spoke, or whatever. So you go to the bike shop. That's the other thing that's changed dramatically in the market is most of the years when I was working in bike shops, if you wanted any of these items, you had to go through a bike shop because that was the only place to get it. That was the only place you had distribution for parts. Where nowadays the bike shop is there as a service hub and a knowledge hub, but there's almost any single part you want available anywhere on the internet. So the market has changed quite a bit. Margins have changed quite a bit. And that's the other thing that changed with my new bike shop. It was right before COVID times, when things were just absolutely crazy during COVID, but it's really challenging to play this game of selling brand new bicycles as a small independent retailer. Trek, Specialized, Norco, Raleigh, all the big companies, they will gladly get you bikes and they will gladly give you 50 bikes with dating, which means, okay, it's January, I'll give you 50 bikes, but by July 1st, you've got to pay for all of them, and then by July 1st, they're coming out with their next batch of bikes. And then meantime, I still have 20 of those other ones left. You spent half that money. It's really it's a juggle. It's a juggle and it's a struggle. And then you've only got 30 bikes on the floor. Customers come in, they describe this beautiful dream bike that they want, and you don't have one that looks like that. You pull out the catalog, you go through all the pictures, and you talk about this and that. And like, oh, I like that one. Can I test ride it? And then you can't get it for a test ride as an owner of a bike shop. You just have to buy that bike, hope they want it. So I just couldn't take it anymore. It was just too much of a struggle, too time consuming. And I remember back in the old days at Angle Lake Cyclery, we did used bikes. People did trade-ins. People would upgrade their bikes. And what got me into that is I started buying and selling collectible antique books because my mom does that. My brother does that as a side business. Think about, people like books. Well, people still like a hard copy book, a tactile experience of actually touching and feeling a book. But you can find some really neat, cool books. Like think of Gone with the Wind, first edition with a dust jacket is probably worth $5,000 to $10,000. Well, if you could find that someplace for $10, I mean, that's awesome. Of course, you don't find that, but it's the search, it's the hunt. I've always been interested in knowledge and trivia and that kind of stuff. So I'm pursuing books. And I thought about, I'm like, why am I not selling used bicycles? Because I'm researching books because I don't know about the publisher and the publication date and is this the first edition and the condition of them and all that. And I'm like, I don't know everything about bikes, but I know a lot about bikes. And I can just look at bikes and I can just buy them, fix them up, and resell them. And I've been doing that since a year before COVID. So since 19, I think. And that's been fantastic. I wish I did that way earlier. It's a much better business. It's a better margin. Right now, I still have a dozen bikes to work on and to fix. Where this was the most difficult time for people that work in the big, full retail bike shops. Christmas is over. The season hasn't started yet. So now what do? It's time to clean the shop. Let's go reorganize the helmets. Let's dust down the water bottles. Let's move the road bikes into that corner and let's put the kids' bikes in this corner. And there's just nothing happening. So With used bikes, I'm busy. The challenge is, how do you find used bikes? I've got a couple of people that are kind of pickers that bring them to me and that look for them. I've got a father-in-law that's retired. He just loves scouring through Craigslist and OfferUp and all that stuff. And of course, I post on my website. But then the other challenge to this is the sketchy people that start showing up with, like a carbon fiber Cervelo with clipless pedals, a GPS and a heart rate monitor. And this person looks like they've been living outside for a while, and you're like, where'd you get this bike? Oh, it's from my uncle. And, and they'll sell it cheap, but you don't want any part of that. So you try to discourage as much of that as possible. I've got stories about recovering stolen bikes, having bikes stolen, all kinds of bad things. And the bottom line is the police are far too busy with other things. So nobody really cares about the whole stolen bike market. So I do what I can to limit that kind of stuff, but I truly enjoy the used bike aspect. And again, it's the mechanical part of it, looking at the bike and figuring out what this bike needs, what I can pay for it, what I can sell for it, all that kind of stuff. So I really enjoy that aspect of the work. It's really given me a second life in the bike business, let's say, here in my almost to February, in my 23rd year right now, getting ready for 24th.
That's so cool. I'm wondering if along the way, if you ever went back to Beverly Bike Shop and said, hey, here's what you inspired.
I never did go back in. I had a couple of emails over the years. I was there last summer, and I still have one sister that lives in that neighborhood. The neighborhood's called Beverly. It's in the city of Chicago, far south side. And I went to her house to do some kind of handyman work for her. And there it is, Jim's. What used to be Jim's. It was Jim's Beverly Cyclery. And it's still there. It's just called Beverly Cyclery, but now it's for sale. But it's kind of cool. The old sign is still there. I certainly, felt some tugs at my heartstrings looking at it. And about 5 years ago, a guy that was working with me, his wife lives in Alsip, which is a southern suburb. He was down in that neighborhood, and he actually went into the bike shop. He was working for me at that time, and he went in and talked to them, and like, oh, I know Phil, and they actually still knew about me. So I thought that was cool. No, I never went back in and talk to the owners again and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it definitely just changed my pathway. It's funny how people believe in fate or destiny or whatever. I don't. I mean, life is a matter of circumstance and situations and what you make out of it. But yeah, a lot of stuff has happened since then. And the bicycle has certainly brought me a lot of happiness and overall comfort in my work. I certainly could have made a lot more money, I think, in the business world and done a lot more things. But you know what? I'm happy. I'm successful. Nowadays, I get vacations when I want, that type of thing. That's the thing. When you open your own business, it's like, oh, you can open your own business. You can do what you want. Well, that's true. But you also don't have any paid vacations. You don't have any paid benefits, no healthcare. You can't call in sick. You have to do the computers, the garbage, the plumbing, the tech work, the ordering, the customer service, everything, so you have to wear all these hats, and it's quite a challenge to keep it going. But I thoroughly enjoy it. And I've gotten to the point now where, like, I'm about to go on a vacation for 2 weeks. I don't have any employees right now. I'm just going to put a sign up on the door and gone for 2 weeks. I'll be back at this date. Well, while I'm gone, I'm probably going to lose $2,000 to $3,000 based on rent and sales. But you know what? Life is too short. I'm not going to lay in bed on my dying days and think, oh, it was so great that I made that extra money, instead of going and having a fun experience and going on a vacation. And I work so I can live, so I can enjoy all those experiences. I don't live to work. Some people, like, I remember the original owner of Angle Lake Cyclery, the father, the patriarch, he had 5 or 6 different bike shops, tremendously successful, but still had a rusted out van with a door that didn't close all the way. It'd have a bungee strap on it. Probably had $2 million in the bank when he passed. It's like, I just don't want to live, that doesn't make me happy. What makes me happy is being comfortable, having experiences, and then going out and enjoying them.
So it seems like there's like different worlds of bicycling, like you talked about mountain biking, and that's quite different from road biking. There's, the world of bikes for kids, for young kids. Do you kind of see that in your shop? Is that it's not just one shop? It's like there's different worlds that you're feeding.
Absolutely. Each customer is unique in what they're seeking and what you can do to help them. I've been involved in experiences from, a 5-year-old child with their very first bike coming in with grandpa and grandma. And that's very exciting, and it's cool, and it's a fun experience. And I get to be there for that. And then they leave. So I get a snapshot of that whole experience. And I'm also not there when the kid falls off the bike or it's time to take it away and then they start crying and those types of things. So there's one experience. I've had another one, a memorable customer had Frank, He was the oldest guy that I ever sold a brand new bike to for himself. He was 83 years old. Long time retired, used to be a machinist. His hearing was bad because he was in the Navy and there was a boiler explosion. So he had one ear that didn't work. His wife had died 5 years previously, but he was just an active guy. So he's like, what am I going to do? Well, he liked riding a bike. So he took up cycling. He took up playing the violin because he decided he wanted to play the violin. But he came in and he bought a bike from me. And it's what we call a comfort bike. So it's a mountain bike designed to ride in the city. But that's what made him happy. And I would see him come in. He'd come in every 6 months and he would want a tune-up. Like guys of that age, like, I need to grease the bearings and we need to lube the chain, even if it didn't really need it. And I would tell him, it made him feel better, peace of mind, that type of thing. So there's another type of customer. Then I also have, young customers that are just real go-getters in the mountain bike world, like people that go up to Whistler and they're launching off the sides of buildings and crazy stuff like that. Then distance road cyclists. I've been involved in helping people do cross-country treks. I've had lots of customers that are racers. Lots of people riding down the Oregon coast all the way down to California. Had a customer, also another experience where he got into endurance cycling, not randoneering like down here. He did do some of that, but he decided he's going to do the Iditarod, which is the Iditarod course, but you can do it either by foot, on skis, or on a bicycle. It just has to be human powered, so you don't have dogs. And that race still goes on today. He went, I think it's 1,200 miles or something like that. So that was quite unique, trying to build up a bike for that experience. That was before fat tire bikes and all that. He did make it, I think, 600 miles before he bailed out. But, just all these different people, all these different experiences. Lately, last 2 years, I met a woman from Tacoma, 92 years old, Carol Kalapis, who's been there around that neighborhood forever, who has an adult trike. And she calls me on the phone and she's like, I've got this adult trike and it's just, the derailleur doesn't work. It's made in China. This China stuff just doesn't work. And I'm like, well, I don't know. You can bring it on in. So she brings it in and I'm like, are you going to be able to get it here? She's like, oh yeah. She's a problem solver, like a lot of us have been over the years, especially a person of that age. And she has a special bike rack in the back of her vehicle where there's a little hoist that lifts the front wheel. And then there's another little hoist that she just has to barely pick up the back and set it on this wheel holder. And she can drive around with her trike. And it gives her mental clarity. It gives her exercise. It gives her purpose to her day where she goes out and rides around on it. So seeing that type of inspiration on bikes has been, it's really fun. And so I enjoy that. One of the things that's lately has come up that it's just different for me is the whole world of now we're into electric bikes. And that seems to be kind of the future. I mean, people certainly gravitate towards them. They are quite popular at a number of shops. I am not an electric bike shop. I'm not entirely against them. I have people in my family own them. I have friends that have them. I ride with friends that have them, but I just don't work on them. It's kind of a different liability. It's kind of a different world. It's e-mobility versus I think back to all the days that, I wanted exercise and I wanted mobility and all the other things. And you can still do that with an electric bike, but it's just a whole different world. And plus, like I said, I don't really enjoy the suspension technology. Similar idea with electric bikes. I mean, oh my gosh, all the wiring and the motor and the battery, just all that stuff, just totally different experience. So yes, but one of the things that makes a bike shop interesting is each customer is unique and different, and you have to kind of gauge what they're after and try to assess that and do all this within 2 minutes. It's like, I love to talk to a person live in person with the bicycle there. When I have that bike there, man, I can really figure stuff out within 2 minutes. When they call on the phone and have a long description of a problem, that's something that's been annoying them forever. And it could be this, it could be that. It's like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And you have to go through all this. And just bring me the bike. And I'm like, whether it's me or another bike shop, please just show up in person and let's just look at it, talk about it, give you an accurate estimate right off the bat. And then you can decide what you want to do from there. So I still enjoy that aspect of the job.
Now, are there some trends that you see in bike technology, whether it's frame materials or derailleurs or whatever, that are intriguing to you?
Definitely just increased range of the gear ratio, we would call it. So that's, we have, when we were young, when the first 10-speed bikes came out, like old people still call it, oh, it's a 10-speed. Well, that's just like an old Schwinn Varsity meant you had 2 sprockets in the front, 5 in the back. Well, nowadays, modern mountain bikes, gravel bikes, which are quite popular, road bikes, are all typically 11 or 12 speeds, and it's just 1 sprocket in the front, and then all the gears are in the back. So actually that really helps things quite a bit, not so much for mechanics, but for the cyclists in general, especially as a novice cyclist. I've had hours and hours and hours explaining to people how to shift a bike that has a front derailleur. So it could be quite problematic, especially the older road bikes. We had 3 rings in the front, maybe 9 in the back, 8 in the back. When you back off the tension, the best I can get through to people is if they've ever driven a manual transmission car. So if you drive a stick shift car, a manual, when you're shifting from second to third, third to fourth, whatever you're shifting from, you engage the clutch, you take off the gas. The last thing you want to do is hit the gas. Well, a lot of people they're shifting because they're chasing their buddy up front, or they're trying to get up this hill. So they're pedaling super fast. They shift. And the moment that front derailleur shifts, that crank goes twice as fast as the chain is going. It doesn't match up. Boom, chain falls off. They're sure it's a mechanical problem. Well, sometimes it is a mechanical problem, but usually it's what we call OE, operator error. So that has helped a lot. Getting rid of the front derailleur has been a tremendous improvement. The technology on mountain bikes has just been overwhelming every year with the better shocks on them, the shifting capabilities that they have, the tubeless tires, the size of the tires. All of those things have really increased the range of mountain biking and just made it a lot more fun and comfortable. Lots of old people are like, well, we didn't have that back in the old days. Well, yeah, but that's fine. When you got your teeth rattled and you bounced along like crazy, and it was very difficult to navigate difficult terrain, especially at speed, with the bikes that we had in the past compared to the bikes that we have now. So, and watching that technology come through, it's always at the highest end. Like, oh, I know a guy, everyone knows, like, oh, I know this guy's got a bike that cost $8,000. And it's like they're mad about it. It's like, it's not your money. If they can afford $8,000 and their family's being fed and they do the mortgage, like, who cares? Let them go buy it. But anyway, those bikes have the newest technology, and that trickles down. So a 10-year-old $8,000 bike, well, you know what? Nowadays, that's only $2,000. The other interesting thing about cycling in general, like we talked about 10 speeds, and that was the rage when I was in bike shops way back when. So there was 5 gears on the back. Then I remember when it went to 6. Then I remember when it went to 7. Then it went to 8, and I kept, like, by the time I got to 8, I'm like, oh my God, how many gears are they going to put back there? This is just way too much. This is just over redundant. And now we're up to 12. And with each of these advancements, my parts wall is advancing as well. There's different chain for 7-speed, 9-speed, 10-speed, 11-speed, 12-speed. And they don't work. They're not intercompatible because the range and the tolerance on them is different. But you either accept it and learn to embrace the technology and learn how to be proficient at it, or you're just like, oh, it's just not for me. I'm just an old fart. It's like, but I still enjoy it. I still enjoy the technical aspects. The other thing is the braking technology obviously is way better. Nowadays, almost every bike that's worth more than $400 or $500 has disc brakes, which are relatively easy if it's a cable disc brake. But then now once we get up to 800 to 1,000, hydraulic disc brakes. So brake lever has fluid in it. Now you're pumping fluid into the master cylinder. It's compressing the caliper on the back. Maybe have a double caliper, even a quad caliper. Just lots of variables on that. So that's been quite the challenge. But again, something you have to learn. You have to do it. And that's the other thing with bike shops. Like, we don't have anyone teaching us this stuff. But thank goodness nowadays we do have YouTube. So just like everybody else, like if I have issues, like when we started this podcast, I couldn't get the volume to work. So I went to Google and said, why can't I get my Chromecast to work? So sure enough, figure out how to go to settings and do it, whatever. So a lot of that is still relevant in bike shops today is, man, how do we figure this stuff out? Or 30 years ago, it was like, if there wasn't somebody in the shop who knew how to fix that, then that was a problem.
What are some essential maintenance tips that every cyclist should know?
Good question. The absolute essential, and what I see a lot, even to this day, that people do not do, number one thing, relatively easy, put air in your tires, people. Oh my goodness. Nobody seems to be aware that once a tire is inflated, they just think, well, I pumped it up. Unless it has a hole in it, it should be fine. Well, inside of most tires, there's an inner tube. There are quite a few that are tubeless nowadays. But let's think about an inner tube. And then again, another analogy, let's think about a birthday party. And we've got balloons hanging on the wall. So we had a nice party. The balloons are on the wall. That was Saturday. Now it's Sunday. The balloons are still there. By Monday, these balloons are starting to shrivel. By the following Saturday, the balloons are down to half size. Week after that, there's nothing left. Well, inside of your tire is a balloon, basically, is the inner tube. And it's a porous rubber material. It does not hold pressure entirely forever. It just pressure slowly seeps out. It loses air pressure over time. So the narrower the tire, the higher pressure required. Like STP, if you're not running your tire at max pressure, 90 to 100, man, you're losing a lot of efficiency. And you're also you could possibly damage the rim if you hit a hole or something like that. But I just remember even before I worked in a bike shop, riding along on a bike, bouncing along and hitting a bump, and you could feel that tire go through the hole and then actually bang into the ground. And it was the rim hitting the ground. And I was, oh my gosh, I don't have enough air in my tires. So if people just actually put enough air in their tires, I say once a month, at least check them. Road bike once a week. I mean, every time I leave the garage, you should just pinch your tire and make sure you've got enough air. So that's an easy one. I mean, everybody should be able to do that. And then the other easy one, lubricate your chain. Doesn't have to be coated like really thick, and like old timers, like even older than us, they would use 3-in-1 oil or household oil or something really thick and viscous. That's not good either. Even if it's WD-40, that's fine. I mean, just put something on there. So we lube the chain and then wipe off the excess, which also seems counterintuitive because I kind of put a little bit of lube on the entire chain, let it sit for a minute, take a good rag and just pinch that chain and just pedal it right on through there. That cleans the chain, lubes it all up at the same time, makes it super awesome. Back to a quick STP story. Like when you ride STP, the other thing I enjoyed about it, being a bicycle person, or you call them a bike nut, there's just every type of bicycle imaginable out there. And then there are also every type of poorly maintained bicycle out there as well. Like you're riding by somebody, you can just hear their bike go. I'm like, oh my God, how can you listen to that 10 hours a day all the way to Portland? It's like you could just pee on that bike. It would sound better than it does now. My goodness. So just basic maintenance like that. I'm not like anal retentive, like it has to be absolutely immaculate. We'll do a mountain bike ride and put the bike away dirty, but before you go out again, you better, at least lube the chain, wipe off the rims if it's a rim drive brake. If it's a mountain bike, it'd be even better if you kind of use a hose, but very lightly hose it, not like the pros do with a pressure washer and just hose the heck out of it. Just kind of light and brush it all down. But number 1 and 2 things: air in the tires, lube in the chain.
Do you see some common mistakes or misconceptions about bike maintenance that show up a lot?
I mean, just that bikes need maintenance just in general. I mean, chains wear out, sprockets wear out, cables stretch, things happen. People are like, well, I just got this bike, it was $1,000 bike. I mean, I can't believe the stuff everything has been fine. So I was like, well, everything was fine. It's like, well, that's how problems happen, like your car was fine too, until that one day when it started making that noise, stuff happens. So, and again, it's problem solving. So it's trying to understand in their world, like what's going on with this bike? What are their expectations of the bike? That's the other thing too, is I have to learn not to project my maintenance expectations onto all of my customers. If they ask or inquire, then I can certainly point advice. But if they just show up with a really poorly maintained bike and looks horrible, I mean, you try to not, and they'll be like, well, the shifting doesn't seem to work well. I mean, have you looked at it? Oh my God, the chain is rusty. Look at this cable. If you push it, it feels like I need a channel locks to move the lever because there's so much resistance in the cable. And people just get used to stuff, I mean, like on a road bike, I like it to be nice and clean when it's done. I'm working on a road bike. I want to replace the handlebar tape because I'm like, well, look at this tape. It's all ripped and shredded and falling off. And they think I'm upselling. They're like, yeah, we should get tape. Oh, I don't need that. Looks fine. I'm like, okay. I don't know how you can look at that all day long, but so you just have to, it's again, just trying to read the room, right? You just have to understand what they're asking for and try to either offer a solution or tell them what it takes to do it. And, I certainly don't have every customer that comes in take my solutions and my advice, but most of them do. And if they want their bike to work, I mean, I have a very good success rate. I have very few bikes that are coming back because I really like to get it done right. One of my biggest fears and heart palpitation when I see a car pull up of a bike that I just did some big job on like 2 days ago or something, and they're coming back with the bike, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Is the pedal tight? Did I forget to set this or that? And sometimes that's a major problem, but not typically. So,
where do you think the future of cycling is heading, both in terms of technology and just the cycling community?
E-bikes are the future. It does bring more people into cycling, but everybody, I mean, I don't know, instead of bikes have always been more about performance, like this one's lighter, easier to pedal, this or that, where the e-bikes seem like it's just, this has more power, has more range, that type of stuff. Seems like it's really I think 50% of the market nowadays, maybe, I don't know, maybe 30, maybe not 50%. That's not fair. 30% at least. But there's still always going to be people out there pedaling, like especially young people and kids having different size bikes. I mean, the technology between the chains and the brakes and the shifters is still basically the same. And I think it's going to continue that way for a long time.
Anything new for Phil's Bike Shop in 2024? What do you have upcoming?
No, I guess what's upcoming is Phil's Bike Shop will be in its 24th year, and then the 25th year it's time for a new lease. And then I'm like, I'm at that age now. Like, I have friends that are retired, and I'm the youngest of 7, as I said, in my family. So a couple of siblings are retired. So now I'm finally like, oh, come to the realization, wow, how long am I going to do this? I don't know. It's like, am I really going to keep doing this? So I still thoroughly enjoy the mechanical aspect of it and working on bikes, but the whole retail hours and and doing retail and communicating with people is not always the most fun. I mean, it's great when it works, when I like them, they like me, we understand each other, but it doesn't always work for anybody anywhere, whether it's Safeway or the bike shop or your auto repair or whatever. So it's not always easy to run a retail business with all of these customers. So I'm just going to be doing more of the same for now. Just keep rolling with my used bike inventory. Actually, I was thinking this morning, I was like, I've already got like 4 vacations planned out. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to miss a lot of time from work. So, but then every time I take a vacation, then I come back with renewed motivation. Like, all right, I need to work. I got to make some more money. We got to make this happen. So it's, I still enjoy coming to work every day, and I still enjoy working on the bikes. Another thing that we haven't discussed, I've been waiting for it to come up, but I know we're almost done, but this is an important part of my cycling life, is throughout all of the years, I have occasionally in the summertime, I have somebody come in and they're like, I just need a bike. It doesn't need to be that good. It needs to be cheap. I'm only going to use it for a week because I'm going out to the desert. I'm going out to this thing called Burning Man. I'm like, Burning Man? What's that? That sounds kind of wacky. So I had a few customers that did that. And then so it was on my radar. Then I had a local customer 15 years ago, determined a bike nut. The guy owns 10 bikes. He's a triathlete. He's a former Marine, former cop, just go, go, go all the time. And he comes in and he's got a Burning Man bike. And a Burning Man bike is basically just a cheaper, typically a mountain bike. Again, you're taking it out to a hostile desert environment. You're not going to bring your nice fancy bike. And he's like, oh, I just need this tune-up for Burning Man. I'm like, oh, you go to Burning Man? I've always considered Burning Man. It's kind of been on my radar. And he's like, well, you should come. You should just come to our camp. You should join us. And I thought about it. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, bam, here's an invitation. I'm like, well, maybe I could. Yeah, I don't know. So I didn't do anything the first year. Then I still see him with his road bikes and stuff. And then the next year rolls around, and again, we have this discussion about Burning Man. And it's like, and I told him, he's like, you know what? This year I'm going to go to Burning Man. That was in 2013. And so I'm married, and I had the discussion with my wife, gently, of like, well, honey, this thing has come up. It's called Burning Man. There's a huge bike culture there. And I just feel like I need to go see it. I need to go down there. I need to find out what this is all about. So if you want to come, that's awesome. But basically, I'm going without you. And she's like, no, I want to go. So she came with me. Fortunately, she loves it. And we've been going back to Burning Man every year since. So I'm a burner, you would call it. So up on this side of the world, there's basically, it's like a different world when you go to Burning Man, which is in the northeast corner of Nevada, about 100 miles from Reno, near Gerlach and Empire, out in the Black Rock Desert. And Burning Man is a lot of things to a lot of people, but what it really is a community of people that just come together and make this experience happen. It's not a festival where there's bands set up or anything set up. The whole event happens because of the participants that show up that make it happen. So if you come to Burning Man and you do it right, you're bringing a skill or you're bringing a gift. So a lot of camps will make food. They'll make chainsaw margaritas, or they have a clothing boutique, or they have free sunblock or whatever. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do at Burning Man? The camp that I go to is called Camp Sweaty Betty. And what they do is they have a misting parlor. So they have a 20 by 20, actually 10 by 20 Costco, like kind of a pop-up tent you would park your spare car under in the driveway. And they bring out fans, they bring out a pump, they bring water. And, the desert's 105 degrees. So they have like a little misting parlor. So you walk through there and you go like, oh, I'm getting misted. So I thought, well, I don't know about this misting parlor. What am I going to do there? Well, I work on bikes. So I guess I've heard Burning Man is quite popular with bikes. So for this period of time, there's 80,000 people and there's 65,000 bicycles at Burning Man within this period. So it is actually during that time, the largest per capita bike usage of any city in the world for that period of time. And so it is quite difficult environment. It's a dried lake bed. They call it the playa. So under good conditions, it's just hard and relatively smooth, but dust can come up. And this dust is like particulate matter you mix between drywall dust and sand and talcum powder. And it is very invasive. It's acidic. So if it sits on anything metal for any period of time, it will corrode things. It just gets all nasty. I always tell people, like, everything man-made, like products and items that you bring to Burning Man, come back all screwed up. But you as a person, if you do it properly, you go to Burning Man and you come back improved and you're a better person. So anyway, the first year I'm like, well, I can kind of fix bikes. I mean, I can fix bikes. So I decided I'm going to do that. And they're like, oh yeah, that would be useful. You'll be really popular. So I actually bought a trailer with me and I brought a work stand and a bunch of tools and parts. And I decided I'm just going to go ride around with my bike and I'm just going to pull up and I'm going to fix people's bikes. So I did that and I probably fixed 20 bikes and it was amazing. And people couldn't, I'd see someone pulled over. I mean, I'm a bike guy. It's pretty obvious to see when somebody has a problem. Oh, that guy's holding his derailleur. It's broken. That guy has a flat. So I fixed all these types of things. It was really rewarding. It was really enriching. And I decided, you know what I really need to do is if I'm going to fix bikes, kind of like at Phil's Bike Shop, they just need to come to me. So I invested in a whole 20 by 20 shade structure, got a big roof rack for my van, extra work stand, another person to help me. I bring down a ton of my used parts, bearings, tires, pedals, chains, tubes, cranks, handlebars, grips, seats, seat pads, everything, lubricant, and set up a bike shop, Betty's Bike Shop, because I'm at Camp Sweaty Betty. So I'm not Phil there. People will be like, are you Phil? And the other thing is when you're at Burning Man, typically you get given a name. It's like your burner name. And you can't just be like, oh, I'm superstar or whatever. You can't pick your own name. So your friends pick your name and usually did something stupid or something really awesome. So the people at my camp, after year one, they decide my name is Wheels. I'm like, oh, well, that's a good name because I keep people rolling. So when I go to Burning Man, I'm a different person. I'm Wheels. So during that time, I spend about 35 hours. I have hours at the shop, just like I do here, but they're shorter. And we typically fix anywhere from 300 to 500 bicycles at Burning Man. And so on this side of the world, I'm quite popular. People like me here. I know how to fix bikes in Federal Way. They come in, they appreciate me. But at Burning Man, I am a superstar. I'm like rock star, Superman status. If you do not have a bicycle, it's 10 square miles. And if you don't have a bicycle, you're in major trouble. And again, there are people, they have a bicycle, but they don't do any maintenance to it once they come home from their previous Burning Man experience. So the bike is all tires are rotted, the chain is beat up, and well, it worked. It's funny. They think about their outfits and their lights and their coolers and all the real cool clothes and other stuff. And a bicycle is like, oh, well, I have one, kind of like just an item that you have. Well, then they show up with it. And if it doesn't work, major problem. And there are a few other bike camps, but I think I'm the only one that actually brings parts. So half of my load down there is all bike stuff for other people. Because my bike, no problem, because I show up prepared. My wife's bike, no problem, because we do maintenance on it. But so that is really the most rewarding, enriching thing that I do in the cycling industry now is going to Burning Man and fixing bikes. So it's just really, truly special. The meeting of people, like I have a book and I have people sign it, typically people from 20 to 30 different countries, 30 different states, all over the world. And everyone just has a unique shared love of just this whole experience. And mostly, I mean, I say on this side of the world, maybe 60% of the people I meet are like people right off the bat. I think this person's pretty cool. I'd like to meet them. Or I hate to say it, but 40%, I really don't even want to talk to them. Whereas at Burning Man, I think it's like 90% positive people. Because if you've made the effort to get down there and make this thing happen, there's something special about you within that you're able to overcome, solve problems. Uh-oh, I hear my front door going. So
okay.
I hate to end it on that, but I did want to get into Burning. Hold on one sec. I'm just going to tell them I'll be right there. Right there. Give me 1 minute. All right, Tom. Well, I have to open my shop. That got my first customer here banging on the door.
Well, fantastic.
Yeah. And I was just going to say one of the things, I've also done quite a bit of charity work with, you mentioned Bikes for Kids. There's a charity down here in Marine View Presbyterian Church. We do Bikes for Kids. You start with 4 old guys. Now it's 20 old guys. They have a bike shop. I help them maintain bikes. I work at JBLM at Christmas time for the Santa's Castle. Give them 20 to 30 bikes. I've done some free bike work here in the city for low-income people, but there's just something really special about Burning Man. So all you people out there, if you want a magical world experience, you need to go do it.
Well, it sounds like definitely a lifetime experience, and I think people are certainly fortunate to have you there. I bet you've saved Burning Man for people.
Exactly, and that's exactly the saying. People say, "Oh my God, you saved my burn, thank you," and then I get big hugs, and then they want to give you a gift. The other thing I didn't mention about Burning Man is it's a gifting society, so there's no charge for this. So it's not like, hey, if you give me a beer, I'll fix your bike. I'm just there. I fix bikes. I hope that you're going to go out and spread love and do things for other people as well. Now, you can't just show up and be a jerk and say, hey, fix my bike. I mean, it's a it's like going to your neighbor's house and asking for help or asking to borrow a tool. So you're not going to charge for it, but it takes common respect and love and appreciation. So yes, I've heard hundreds of times you have saved my burns, and I really appreciate that. And sometimes it's really stressful, and I think, why am I working so hard here? But you know what? I get as much out of it as they do. And so it's really a rewarding experience.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Phil, and I'll let you go. Take care of your customer.
All right, Tom, I got a customer. I got a live one. I got to at least make a few dollars today so I can make money so I can get back to Burning Man.
Sounds good.
And all you people, go out and look up Burning Man online. There's a tremendous number of videos and information, and it's not for everybody, but it's something that should be investigated.
Sounds good.
Peace out. Take care.
Bye now. Am I the only one who was really surprised by Phil mentioning tire pressure as the first thing that came to his mind when I asked about maintenance that people need to do? I don't know anyone that doesn't think about their tire pressure before riding. But like I mentioned in the interview, I am part of a particular cycling world. Phil mentioned the percentage of e-bikes making up sales in the US, so I thought I would look into that a bit. I pulled up a site called Statista that I will link in the show notes. I'm not familiar with the site, but it looked reliable. They reported that in 2019, e-bikes made up less than 1% of the market, but by 2022, that had risen to 4%. So it is still a small piece of total bike sales. They also commented that the US e-bike market is not as developed as it is in Europe. I find it interesting that it sounds like Phil is getting a different perception of e-bike sales. I would like to hear from you stories about your favorite bike shop or bike mechanic, why you like them, how they've impressed you. You can find my email and podcast Instagram in the show notes. I hope if you're like me and you need a good bike mechanic, that you have found one and they have kept you rolling along. Good luck with all your rides, whether they be cold or warm. And remember, age is just a gear change.